Hoje é dia 24 de junho, são neste momento 5 minutos para as 4, estão 25 graus, está um bocadinho de umidade. Eu aqui dentro da minha caminhonete está fresquinho, está o ar-condicionado a trabalhar. E então hoje temos duas descargas. A primeira vamos para Ealing, a primeira loja. Eu em princípio vou fazer 2 vídeos com esta descarga, um para cada loja. Assim posso mostrar um bocadinho mais, eu não faço os vídeos tão completos. Neste momento estamos a passar por Tottenham, estamos na 406, que é a norte circular. Eu já tinha explicado antes, há a sul circular e norte circular. Estamos no norte circular. Como podem ver aí à frente há uma incineradora chamada London Waste. Podem ver aí as antenas, as chaminés. E então foi aqui que eu andei a descarregar durante 6 anos, quando trabalhei com o caminhão de lixo. Era aqui que vinha. Portanto eu fazia a zona de Tottenham e era aqui que vinha descarregar. Ealing é ao pé de, relativamente perto de Wembley. Já vamos passar relativamente perto do estádio. Espero que consiga apanhar com esta câmera. Vou fazer zooming, que é para ver se consigo apanhar o estádio. Não é longe, é para aí talvez a quilómetro desta 406. Vamos ver o que é que vai. Mais um update do estado da minha esposa. Ela já está em casa outra vez. Amanhã estava a ver que tinha que ir com ela outra vez para o hospital, porque no hospital receitaram-lhe um antibiótico com que ela não estava a dar bem. Hoje de manhã fui com ela já ao médico de família e eles decidiram mudar o antibiótico. E ela começou logo a melhorar. Portanto, neste momento já está muito melhor. Já falei com ela há bocadinho ao telefone, ela telefonou, e está-se a sentir melhor e em princípio já não precisa voltar ao hospital. Vamos lá ver, cruzar os dedos e esperar que isso seja assim.
just look at it, ignore any of what's gone on today. If you just look at whether you should have hired Andy Coulson, the fact is he was very good at his job. I mean, he was in the job from 2006-7 until he resigned in 2011, I think. He did a brilliant job for David Cameron. So, and presumably George Osborne will say, well, I was vindicated. He did a good job, but of course they didn't know what was about to him.
But I think the case the apology rests on, I asked him, effectively, did he have anything to hide? And he told me no. And I think most people will think, wasn't that a bit naive? I mean, okay, it's a very honourable thing to say, I asked him and I trusted him. But given the background to why he had resigned as the editor of News of the World, given the suspicions that there were at the time, I say it just looked like they were so keen to appoint him because he would do a good job that they overlooked the downfalls that came eventually.
It's a bit like a football manager, isn't it? Sort of getting a star strike of £2 million rather than 20 million, wanting to believe that he's really not injury prone, and then unfortunately finding out that he actually is. What consequence do you think this will have for David Cameron? Is it something that's going to really stick in the electorate's mind come the next election?
I suspect not, because it has been going on for so long. It is a full stop, and it is a confirmation of what people may have thought had happened. But I can't see where the next leg of the story comes from. And then who knows what, eventually, presumably, of course, when he's free to tell his story, may tell his story, and it'll be different with that, for sure, it's a long way out.
Anyway, that's a book I'd like to see.
But you mentioned Damien Bryan is an interesting point. I mean, Damien Bryan was, in a rough trade, and it was a rough trade, and it still is a rough trade. But no one actually never, said he broke the law. And we now know that on this particular count, because there's another count yet to come, that the editor of Britain's best-selling newspaper broke the law.
In the break, before the break, I said this had been going on for, I thought, 5 or 6 years. You then corrected me in the break to tell me actually it's nearer 10 years. And you're absolutely right, of course. What effect has this had on the media? Okay, we've had the News of the World closing down. That's probably the biggest effect of anything. But in terms of the day-to-day running of a newspaper, the day-to-day operations, what's changed?
Well, the example I give is, do you remember does the name Gary Speed mean anything to you?
Absolutely.
Gary Speed, Wales team manager, committed suicide, and the newspapers were fascinated by the background. They hardly printed a thing. In fact, the name Gary Speed may mean nothing much to people. I guarantee in the old days, everything about Gary Speed would have been turned over, his private life, his financial affairs, and it wasn't. That was self-restraint by the newspapers. Now the question is, will that self-restraint continue now that this case has concluded? I've sometimes, in my dealings with colleagues in the tabloid press, used to call it journalism by what you can get away with. In other words, I don't really care what the law says. I don't really care what the press council or the IPSO says. I think we can get this story and we're going to get away with it. Is that still the culture, or will it return? And my hunch is that it won't return for some time, that the lessons are still fresh in the memory, but I wouldn't count on it forever.
Because in a way, that I think the press has started to behave like broadcasters behave. I mean, the broadcasters are much more heavily regulated. Jardin is to tell you this. I mean, you've been in broadcasting for goodness knows how long.
I was a regulator.
Well, indeed, you were for Ofcom, didn't you? And I've never quite understood why broadcasters are regulated so heavily and the press aren't. It seems to me we're all in the same game. We're all in the communications business. And I don't understand why we have to, in radio and television, have to be regulated so strongly compared to newspapers.
It's increasingly anachronistic, but the starting point was that broadcasters were using a public airwave, and there had to be rules about that, whereas the newspapers were using paper, which was a private activity, and they didn't need the same rules. But actually, in the days of the internet and satellite transmission, what's the difference between a website that comes through a broadcast and a website that comes from a newspaper?
Because it was very interesting this afternoon when we were all wondering whether we could really play this David Cameron tape out again. I see on Twitter the Guardian's uploaded it to their website, so an entirely different ballgame there.
Absolutely.
Let's take a call from Norman, who's in Rickmansworth. Hello, Norman.
Good afternoon. I don't know how you feel on this, but I feel the public are very grateful for any politician that actually apologises for doing something wrong. But on the other hand, they are also fed up of politicians who do not exercise their judgment correctly. And I talk about the expenses scandal as one example. The Prime Minister he is not in the position to be able to say, I will take on people innocent until they're proven guilty. He cannot employ terrorists who simply assure him that they're not terrorists, thieves who say they're not thieves, or people being investigated for criminal offences, because I do not believe in his position in office he has that right or ability. It's admirable for churches and other people, but not for people running out.
Well, if you remember, these charges were not laid at his door when David Cameron took him on. I'm not sitting here defending David Cameron's appointment to Andy Coulson, but I can see how they got themselves into that position. They were very keen to appoint somebody who could help them communicate with a sector of the electorate, sort of basically Essex man, if you like. Andy Coulson, like me, is an Essex boy, and he was very good at that, so you can understand that. But in retrospect, they should have done their due diligence far better than they did. David Cameron, I think, a couple of years ago said, look, I wanted to give him a second chance. He'd resigned as newspaper editor. He'd taken responsibility for something. Was he supposed to be sort of held, not given a second chance? Well, maybe in retrospect, that's what should have happened. Norman, thank you very much indeed. 0345 6060973 is the number to call if you'd like to give me your reaction to the phone hacking trial verdicts. Stuart, it's been great to have you with us for the last half an hour. Thank you very much indeed. That's Stuart Purvis, a Professor of Journalism at City University. I'm Ian Dale at Drive. LBC News Time, it's 4:31. Simon Conway has the headlines.
Ed Miliband says David Cameron still has very serious questions to answer after his former press secretary Andy Coulson was convicted of phone hacking. The Prime Minister has issued a full and frank apology after Mr Coulson was convicted at the Old Bailey. Former News of the World editor Rebecca Brooks, her husband Charlie, and 3 other people were cleared of all charges relating to phone hacking. Before today's verdicts, Charlie Brooks told LBC about the moments police raided his home.
4:45 in the morning, 18 of them came through our kitchen door, which was a little bit of a surprise. Searched our baby's cot, treated us like terrorists, and carted us off to different police stations. They ran up the stairs screaming and shouting. It was a proper raid.
You can hear the full interview with Charlie Brooks after 5 on LBC. The jury is still deliberating on 2 remaining counts against Andy Coulson and former Royal editor Clive Goodman. British number 1 Heather Watson has eased into the second round of Wimbledon. She's beaten Croatia's Ajla Tomljanovic in straight sets 6-3, 6-2. At 4:15, the FTSE 100 was down 4 points at 67.96. And LBC weather, any heavy showers should ease for London and the southeast this evening. Mainly dry overnight with lows of 13 degrees. A mostly dry night elsewhere with cloud and some clear spells. Many places dry and fine tomorrow, but some rain for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. LBC News Time, it's 4:32.
I'm Jay Louise Knight in the LBC Travel Centre, and the A13 already looking busy out of town from the Canning Town flyover to the Lodge Avenue flyover. Usual delay is made worse by a much earlier broken down car, which has now gone. Woodcote Road in Wellington is slow both ways. There was an accident at Stanley Park Road, which is partly blocking the road there. I've just spoken to Dave. He called from the A3. He said it heading south. He said that there's a broken down car in the left-hand lane a few hundred yards before Tolworth. It's already slow back to the Morden Junction. Clockwise M25, busy onto the QE2 bridge from 30 to the A13. Anti-clockwise, busy in patches from Swanee and 3 into the Dartford tunnels. Shepherd's Bush Road is struggling south into roadworks just before Hammersmith Gyratory. Back to the queue there on Hammers reaching Shepherd's Bush Green. And for flights, expect delays and cancellations to flights going to France and other European destinations for the rest of today. And that's due to a strike by French air traffic controllers. Keeping you moving, your next travel update in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel.
With Go2 Meeting, work smarter with a free 30-day trial.
Selling your car privately can be heaps of hassle, but sell to WeBuyAnyCar.com and you can let go of all that. Go on, tell those people who phone up in the dead of the night to take a hike. Say no way, Jose, to checks that bounce. And cheerio to jokers who turn up with no intention of buying. You're just not funny. Instead, join over 500,000 people who've sold their car quickly and safely with WeBuyAnyCar.com, the UK's favourite car buying service.
It's not hard to overload an electrical socket. You just attach too many appliances.
Já nós estamos longe da loja, mais 1,5 km, 2 km estamos lá, talvez um pouquinho mais. mas não é longe. Eu estou a deixar a rádio a falar, para quem tiver algum conhecimento da língua, queira checar como é que está o inglês, podem aproveitar e ver se percebem alguma coisa. Aproveitem. Isto é uma rádio chamada LBC, só de Londres, só onde há música, é só conversação. A maior parte das vezes sobre o que se passa a maior parte das vezes sobre o que as pessoas falam sobre os imigrantes e querem ser da União Europeia e por aí fora. Quase o prato do dia é quase sempre a mesma conversa. Hoje a conversa é sobre umas escutas que se meteram no telefone das pessoas, inclusive numa criança que tinha desaparecido, e eles entraram no telefone dela e começaram a ler as mensagens e ninguém sabia da miúda, ela tinha desaparecido, acabou por saber que ela foi assassinada. E começaram a dar esperanças falsas aos pais, porque começaram a fazer o delete das mensagens para a caixa postal não ficasse cheia, e então as pessoas, como faziam o delete, pensavam que era a própria miúda que estava a fazer o delete das mensagens e sempre pensaram que ela ainda estava viva quando ela já estava morta, até que descobriram o que é que tinha acontecido, e agora é sobre isto que ele está praticamente a falar, porque fecharam um jornal que era News of the World, que é Notícias do Mundo, porque quem fez isso tudo foi este jornal, e então hoje foi o julgamento e um deles foi condenado à prisão e os outros saíram todos em liberdade, e é disso que eles estão a falar. E esse que foi condenado foi assessor de imprensa do primeiro-ministro, já depois disto ter acontecido.
Was actually first out of the block in Treasury questions. He got wind of the verdicts on Twitter, I'd assume, or on his BlackBerry, and he accused the Chancellor George Osborne of bringing his office into disrepute by urging David Cameron to employ the former News of the World editor as his Director of Communications. Remember, Andy Coulson was employed by David Cameron on George Osborne's recommendation, and that's back in 2007. And then, of course, he worked in opposition very effectively. He worked with Steve Hilton very effectively in opposition for entering Downing Street as Director of Communications following the election of the Tories into coalition in May 2010.
Now, this apology was very quick out of the traps this afternoon. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, it's that old PR mantra, isn't it? As soon as you have, if you get it out there quickly, make it. You don't want to have a sort of haggling, couple of days of haggling. You've got PMQs tomorrow, where there are obviously going to be questions about it. David Cameron had made this back in July 2011. He had told the House of Commons, if these allegations against Mr. Coulson are found to be true, then I'll make a full and frank apology. They were found to be true with this one guilty verdict. Remember, there are 2 other verdicts still to come, so we must respect that in terms of our reporting. But this case, this particular charge was upheld by the jury, and so he was, rather than kind of going into a kind of head-to-head battle about will he, won't he apologise, just decided to get it out there quickly, make the statement, although it was very short, and some people questioned whether really was it the full and frank apology that was necessary.
Well, of course, it's Prime Minister's questions tomorrow. Are we to expect a full House of Commons statement from David Cameron on what's happened, a full apology at the dispatch box?
If David Cameron can help it, he won't make a statement. That doesn't mean there won't be an urgent question tabled by a Labour MP, such as Tom Watson or Chris Bryant. They may try their luck with the Speaker John Bercow by tabling an urgent question which will force David Cameron to make a statement about it. The only slight question mark over that is there is an ongoing, there's still proceedings active in terms of remaining verdicts. John Bercow, for all the criticism, he likes to play things by the book. I've spent 3.5 years watching him. Yeah, I think he does. When it
comes to things like this, I know he cuts off MPs if he thinks. I think I've seen him cut off MPs many times when there've been legal cases and MPs want to go straight down the route of naming somebody or bringing a case before Parliament where their legal proceedings are underway, and he'll cut them off. So my suspicion is that he won't grant an urgent question, but of course Ed Miliband, I suspect, will use all 6 of his questions in PMQs tomorrow to have a go at the Prime Minister, and of course I'm sure there'll be some questions from backbench Labour MPs about it.
And of course this is a chance for Ed Miliband to make the running on this issue. If you remember, he did that, was it last year or the year before? Time flies, doesn't it? When he really grabbed this issue by the scruff of the neck, and he was
Ealing,
leading the agenda on it. I think we've lost
chamada tudo, é assim que eles chamam as luzes principais. Agora temos aqui este ciclista a acelerar aqui ao pé de mim. Isto é uma descarga subterrânea, portanto vamos descer para uma cave. A loja é no shopping.
This is the updated version of the Press Complaints Commission.
Ali nos sinais luminosos vamos virar à esquerda. Depois é mais 200 metros e estamos na loja, lá na zona de descarga. Quem for para cima vai para o car park, para o parque para carros, e nós que fomos para a descarga vamos para baixo. Aí está o comedor, não está cá. Yeah, I can see. Thank you. As paredes são todas mocadas. Pronto, passa a vida aqui a bater contra as paredes. E pronto, é o primeiro concluído. Eu vou ter que fazer marcha atrás aqui para o lado esquerdo, onde estão os carrinhos, estas vans, mas enquanto eles estiverem ali não há nada a fazer, portanto há que esperar. A minha hora de descarga é só às 5h30, são neste momento 4:45, portanto falta 45 minutos. Então vou fazer um bom descanso. Tá? Um abraço, até amanhã. Tchau, tchau.